Julian Anderson is one of the leading British composers of his generation. He came to prominence with orchestral pieces and is also well known for his chamber music and his scores for ballets such as Rambert Dance Company's The Comedy of Change. His first opera, Thebans, a version of Sophocles' Oedipus trilogy, has just opened at the London Coliseum in a production by English National Opera. The libretto is by Irish playwright Frank McGuinness, whose stage adaptation of Oedipus the King was produced by the National Theatre in 2008, with Ralph Fiennes in the lead role. The relationship between opera composers and librettists has a long and sometimes turbulent history. Opera cannot exist without words, any more than it can without music. Yet the principal appeal of our most popular and enduring operas is the music, not the text. Often with the best librettos, the writer puts his or her own interests behind those of the composer. Verdi's most successful librettist was Francesco Maria Piave, resident hack at the Fenice Opera House in Venice. Verdi harried poor Piave mercilessly to shape the text the way he wanted it. It's no coincidence that Rigoletto and La Traviata are both Piave librettos. Nor is it coincidence that I Masnadieri, to a libretto by Andrea Maffei, is one of Verdi's least successful operas. Maffei was an intellectual, writer and translator with a reputation far above that of Piave. Verdi respected him too much to bully him in the way that he did Piave. Now tell me about your collaboration. How did it develop? What were the compromises and what did you decide were the priorities?
Compression was an issue which I may say I found Frank handled brilliantly. He was able to condense the sense of big speeches into a few lines, sometimes really in front of my eyes he'd rewrite like that, and magical. Frank was incredibly understanding of the fact that opera librettos are so short. The libretto is short, and because it takes so much longer to sing a word than to say it, even if you're singing it pretty fast.
When I came to write the libretto, I knew that you have to sacrifice your writerly self to the passion and to the power of the music, because that's why you're going to the opera. That's why you're going there. You want to be put in a different place through the power of music.
Julian, many composers choose subjects from the present day because they think this will perhaps communicate more with audiences. But you have chosen a classical tragedy. How did the idea for your opera come about?
The idea for this opera came about through my doing Greek A-level. We were doing Oedipus the King as a set play in Greek, and so I had to spend about 3 months going through it word by word, translating it. And the trigger point was where there is an argument between Oedipus, when he's still got his sight, and the blind prophet Tiresias. In frustration, Oedipus exclaims, "You would provoke a stone to anger." And I thought, when I pieced that sentence together into English with my dictionary, that I'd got yet another sentence wrong. It didn't seem to make initially any sense, and then I suddenly realized, of course, it meant exactly what it said, and was thunderstruck by this modern insult and sentiment of frustration that could have been uttered this morning and was actually written 500 or something BC.
When you work on a libretto, you really have to have an immense bond of trust with whoever you're working with. Working with Julian was an enlightenment, and it was a pleasure because he thinks theatrically. He thinks in tremendously concise, succinct flashes of inspiration or punches of information.
I think I'm a very visual composer, and I imagine visual spaces, colours, landscapes when I compose anyway. And that's no less true of writing an opera than writing, for example, a ballet. Writing this opera, I think the main difference is that it demanded a very great variety of kinds of music, and yet one wants to speak personally. in all those different psychological and physical spaces. And so it stretched me as a composer to produce kinds of sounds, kinds of music that I've never used and never thought of using before. It is a quite different experience from writing concert music, I would say.
We both knew that these plays are ultimately about great sorrows, terrible sorrows, and the telling of these sorrows, the telling of these secrets. And I think that that was an unspoken alliance between us, that we needed to hear the heartbreaking in this music. These three great plays, they weren't meant to be seen as a trilogy, yet they work as a trilogy, and I've always been intrigued as to how to make them work. I don't think doing them in linear fashion, temporal linear fashion, works. Antigone on its own is a sensational play. Antigone as the third part of the Theban plays, I feel shies away from the enormity of the statement about fathers and children, which is at the core of these plays. To end the opera on Antigone's savage lament for her father provides exactly the right note of possession and of haunting and of mourning and of grief that I think is the spur to all of the three plays, and that clarifies it.
There is no point in knowing when all that will happen is beyond help. Powerful words and powerful music. There's no such thing as a professional librettist anymore, as there was in Handel's day and Verdi's day. But composers still do need collaborators who can provide the words that articulate the drama. And it's this fusion of words and music, ideas and emotions, that creates the special alchemy that we call opera. It entertains us, and it provokes and encourages us to ask ourselves what it is to be human.